You think you missed the 1990s because life was simpler. You're wrong. That sudden urge to rewatch old sitcoms or listen to vintage music isn't just nostalgia. Neuroscience reveals it's a trauma response. Your brain is running a silent survival protocol, and it's time you know why. Look around. We are currently living in an era that absolutely refuses to let go of a decade that ended over 25 years ago. If you were born between 1981 and 1996, you are part of a generation experiencing a psychological phenomenon never before seen in human history. A collective, obsessive, and almost desperate fixation on our own childhood. You see it everywhere. The vintage graphic tees, the massive resurgence of vinyl records and film cameras. But most telling of all, it's hidden in our quiet, daily habits. Every single night, millions of adults in their 30s and 40s end their exhausting workdays not by exploring new ideas, but by retreating into the exact same episodes of Friends, The Office, or Seinfeld for the 5th, 10th, or 20th time. Society, and perhaps even your own conscious mind, has rationalized this behavior. We tell ourselves a very comforting lie. We say, "I just like it." The 90s was simply a better, more authentic time. Or, as many popular commentators claim, this ability to disconnect is a testament to the unique resilience of the last analog generation. We wear our nostalgia like a badge of honor, proof that we are somehow grounded in a chaotic digital world. But clinical psychologists and neuroscientists are beginning to paint a much darker, much more unsettling picture. What you are experiencing right now is not a quirky hobby. It is not a generational flex, and it is certainly not a superpower. When you isolate the neural pathways firing during these late-night moments of what we call comfort watching, you don't see a brain that is simply relaxing. You see a brain that is self-medicating. You see a mind desperately deploying a psychological shield to manage chronic, low-grade existential dread. The uncomfortable truth is, you aren't yearning for the past just because it was beautiful. You are fleeing to the past because your present reality has become neurologically unbearable. Your nostalgia is a deeply embedded coping mechanism. It is a symptom of a much larger, invisible crisis sweeping across an entire demographic. To understand what is actually happening to your cognitive processing, we have to stop looking at the pop culture of the 1990s and start looking at the neurobiology of fear and exhaustion. We are about to step into the darkest, most heavily guarded corners of your own mind. And once you see what's actually driving your deepest comforts, you will never look at your childhood memories the same way again. Let's conduct a quick behavioral audit of your typical Tuesday night. You finish your work, you commute home, you eat dinner, and you finally sit down on your couch. You open Netflix, Hulu, or Max. You are staring at an almost infinite library of human creativity. There are thousands of new movies, groundbreaking documentaries, and critically acclaimed series just one click away. And what do? You scroll for 12 minutes, feel a rising sense of decision paralysis, and immediately put on season 4 of a sitcom you already know word for word. You probably joke about this with your friends. You call it a guilty pleasure. But neurologically speaking, there is no pleasure involved in this decision. It is purely an act of psychological defense. To understand this, you have to look at how the human brain processes novelty versus predictability. Your brain is essentially a prediction engine. Its primary goal, evolutionary speaking, is to keep you alive by conserving energy and minimizing surprises. When you consume new media, a new plot, new characters, new stakes, your brain has to burn metabolic energy. It has to pay active attention, process unfamiliar emotional cues, and constantly calculate potential outcomes. In a healthy, balanced state, this cognitive effort is highly rewarding. But the modern millennial brain is not in a healthy, balanced state. It is suffering from severe, chronic cognitive fatigue. Between the endless influx of digital notifications, the curated hyper-reality of social media, the 24-hour nightmare of the modern news cycle, and the crushing economic pressures of daily survival, your cognitive load is completely maxed out by 5 p.m. So, when you sit on that couch, your brain detects the prospect of new information, not as entertainment, but as a threat. It registers novelty as just another stressor. This is where comfort watching steps in. When you put on a show from the 1990s or early 2000s, something fascinating happens inside your cerebral cortex, because you already know exactly what is going to happen. You know the jokes, you know the conflicts, you know the resolutions. Your brain doesn't have to predict anything. The prediction engine shuts down. In this state of total predictability, your nervous system finally drops its guard. Your brain releases a steady, predictable drip of dopamine and oxytocin. You aren't watching television to be entertained. You are using television to artificially induce a state of neurological safety. Clinical psychologists refer to this behavior as utilizing a security blanket, but a more accurate term for this specific generational phenomenon is anesthetic nostalgia. It is a localized, self-administered anesthetic designed to numb the overwhelming baseline anxiety of simply existing in the modern digital world. There is a popular narrative floating around right now. You might have even heard it recently in other video essays that claims people who grew up in the 90s possess this incredible psychological superpower. The claim is that because we grew up without smartphones, we can just sit in silence. We can handle boredom perfectly fine. But let's be brutally honest with ourselves. Can you? Can you really sit in a completely silent room right now without feeling an immediate, creeping sense of dread? The truth is, for millions of adults in this demographic, absolute silence has become terrifying. Because in the silence, the reality of the present moment catches up to you. That is exactly why you need that specific 90s show playing in the background while you cook, while you fold laundry, or while you try to fall asleep. It is not just background noise, it is an acoustic force field. It is a familiar, digitized voice whispering into your subconscious, telling you that you are back in a time when you were safe, when the world made sense, and when the future still felt like a promise. But why did that promise break? Why is your present reality so deeply exhausting that your brain has to constantly flee to the past just to survive the present? To answer that, we have to examine the greatest lie your generation was ever told. To understand why your brain is working so hard to protect you, we have to look at the environment that programmed it. We have to look at the lie you were fed from the moment you were born. If you grew up in the 1990s, you didn't just grow up with dial-up internet and blockbuster video. You were raised inside a highly specific, historically unique psychological bubble. Sociologists often refer to the 90s as the era of the end of history. The Cold War was over. The economy was booming. Technology was viewed as a utopian force that was going to connect humanity, democratize information, and solve our greatest problems. As a child of this era, you were subconsciously indoctrinated with a profound sense of optimism. You were handed a very clear, very safe blueprint for existence. Go to school, get a college degree, buy a house in your 20s, and enjoy a stable, linear, upward trajectory of life. You were told that the future was going to be brilliant. Your brain absorbed this narrative during its most critical developmental window, wiring your baseline expectations for reality around stability and progress. And then you grew up, and the blueprint disintegrated in your hands. Instead of the promised utopia, the millennial generation walked out of childhood and straight into a meat grinder of historical crises. You entered the workforce during the aftermath of the dot-com crash and 9/11s. You tried to build wealth during the 2008 global financial meltdown. You tried to establish your lives during a once-in-a-century pandemic. The internet didn't become a utopian public square. It mutated into a hyper-capitalist surveillance machine designed to monetize your anger, your insecurities, and your attention. The housing market became a luxury reserved for the elite. The cost of living skyrocketed while wages stagnated. And just as you finally started to find your footing, the very white-collar jobs you went into massive student debt to secure are now being actively threatened by artificial intelligence. This isn't just a string of bad luck. From a neurological standpoint, this is a catastrophic system failure. Your brain is currently holding two violently opposing realities at the exact same time. The deeply ingrained childhood expectation of a safe, prosperous future, and the chaotic, hostile, relentlessly exhausting reality of the present day. In psychology, this severe mental conflict is known as cognitive dissonance. But in this scale, affecting an entire generation, it is something much worse. It is a mass psychological trauma that we can call collapsed reality syndrome. Listen to me carefully. If you feel constantly burned out, if you feel like you are perpetually falling behind, you need to understand that you are not lazy. You are not uniquely flawed. You are simply exhausted from grieving a future that you were promised, but never actually arrived. The human brain is not designed to process this level of sustained existential disappointment. It cannot handle the crushing weight of a collapsed reality without a release valve. When a computer system is overwhelmed by a fatal error, it reverts to the last known stable configuration. When a video game character is about to be destroyed by an unbeatable enemy, the player hits pause and reloads the game. Your brain is doing the exact same thing. When you put on that 90s sitcom, when you listen to that old CD, your brain is executing an emergency override. It is abandoning the hostile environment of the 2020s and desperately loading its psychological save state. It is running back to 1998, the exact last moment in history when the world still felt safe, when the future still held promise, and when the blueprint hadn't yet caught on fire. But there is a terrifying downside to hiding in this sanctuary, because while you are retreating into your memories, there are massive, billion-dollar industries that have figured out exactly what your brain is doing, and they are using your trauma against you. If you believe that your sudden craving for a vintage aesthetic or your decision to binge watch a 30-year-old sitcom is a purely organic, personal choice, you are drastically underestimating the modern attention economy. The moment your brain started retreating to the 1990s to escape the anxiety of the 2020s, the most powerful corporations on Earth noticed the data shift. They saw the engagement metrics. They recognized the psychological vulnerability, and they immediately set out to weaponize your trauma. Welcome to the algorithm of nostalgia. Look closely at the current landscape of the global entertainment industry. For the past decade, we have been suffocating inside what critics call the reboot era. Every single month, a beloved 90s cartoon is resurrected into a live-action movie. Every classic sitcom gets a heavily marketed reunion special. Every retro video game is repackaged as a $70 remastered edition. Fashion brands are mass-producing the exact same windbreakers and baggy jeans you wore in middle school. The most common complaint you hear is that Hollywood and pop culture have simply run out of original ideas, that they have become creatively bankrupt. This is entirely false. Entertainment conglomerates haven't run out of ideas. They have simply realized that originality is no longer profitable when dealing with a traumatized demographic. Remember our neurobiological audit from Chapter 2? A chronically exhausted, highly stressed brain views novelty not as exciting, but as a threat. The monolithic corporations that control our media employ legions of data scientists and behavioral neuromarketers who understand this exact cognitive flaw. They know that if you are suffering from millennial burnout, crushed by rent, inflation, and a collapsing social contract, you are not going to gamble your very limited mental energy on a new franchise with unknown characters and an uncertain emotional payoff. You don't want a challenge. You want a guarantee. You are willing to pay a premium for the absolute certainty of feeling safe. So they stopped selling you entertainment. They started selling you emotional anesthetic. They take the exact psychological save state your brain uses to survive, package it behind a monthly subscription paywall, and sell your own childhood back to you. But the exploitation goes far deeper than just Hollywood reboots. The machine learning algorithms governing your TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube feeds have mapped your collapsed reality syndrome with terrifying precision. Every time you pause on a video about dial-up internet sounds or a retrospective on Blockbuster Video, the algorithm logs a micro-interaction. It registers that this specific visual and audio stimuli drastically lowers your cognitive resistance, triggers a dopamine release, and keeps your eyes glued to the screen for exactly 14% longer. The algorithm doesn't care that you are soothing a deep existential wound. It only cares about retention. So, it traps you in a digitized feedback loop of artificial comfort. It floods your feed with nostalgia bait, spoon-feeding you a highly sanitized, corporate-owned version of your own past, designed to keep you pacified, docile, and endlessly scrolling. This is the ultimate psychological betrayal. Your nostalgia was supposed to be your private sanctuary. It was your mind's organic defense mechanism to help you cope with a hostile, unpredictable world. But in the hands of modern tech and media monopolies, your coping mechanism has been hijacked. It has been transformed into the ultimate consumer product. You aren't just passively revisiting your memories anymore. You are being farmed for them. And while you are kept comfortably numb, staring backward into a decade that no longer exists, a very real, very dangerous side effect is quietly taking root in your subconscious. A side effect that is actively destroying your ability to survive the future. There is a concept in clinical psychology known as maladaptive coping. It describes a behavior that initially starts as a brilliant way to protect you from pain, but over time becomes more destructive than the original trauma itself. For millions of millennials, This generational nostalgia has officially crossed that line. When you spend your finite psychological energy artificially recreating a world that no longer exists, you aren't just taking a temporary break from stress, you are living backward. And there is a profound, terrifying danger in living backward. The most immediate consequence of this mass retreat is a collective, generation-wide manifestation of Peter Pan syndrome. But this isn't the cliché version of a teenager simply refusing to get a job. This is a deep, psychological refusal to inhabit the present timeline. When you depend on anesthetic nostalgia to self-soothe every single day, you are building a reinforced bunker inside your own mind. It's warm in there, it's safe. The aesthetic is perfect, the soundtrack is familiar, and the anxiety of the 2020s cannot reach you. But while you are hiding in that bunker, your actual life is passing you by. Think about how human cognition works. In order to build a life, your brain has to be able to imagine the future. It has to project hopes, calculate risks, and visualize a better tomorrow. But when an entire generation redirects its primary cognitive resources toward maintaining a mental simulation of 1998, a massive psychological void opens up. You lose the neurological capacity to visualize a future worth living in. This is the true, quiet tragedy of collapsed reality syndrome. By retreating into the past just to survive the day, you are unintentionally surrendering your tomorrow. Look at the massive, systemic crises defining our current era. Economic instability, the unchecked rise of artificial intelligence, extreme social isolation. These are monumental challenges that require active, engaged, and resilient minds to solve. They require a generation willing to stand its ground, face the fire, and fight to rewrite the broken blueprint of society. But how can you fight for the real world when you are spending all of your emotional bandwidth clinging to a ghost? The corporate algorithms we talked about? They want you passive. They want you comfortable, numb, and endlessly consuming your recycled childhood. Because a generation that is constantly looking backward is a generation that won't push forward. It is a demographic that will accept economic stagnation and social decay simply because they are too exhausted to look away from their screens and demand something better. Every single hour you spend using nostalgia to run away from your baseline anxiety is an hour you are not spending building a reality that you actually want to live in. You are essentially hitting the snooze button on your own existence. Nostalgia, in its healthy, evolutionary form, was designed to be a mirror, a brief reflection to remind you of where you came from. It was never meant to be a house you move back into. If you stay trapped in the 90s, you will quietly watch your real life decay from the inside of a very comfortable, highly curated prison. So, how do we break out? How do you cure a trauma response that feels this incredibly good? The answer isn't to violently rip away your comforts or force yourself to be hyperproductive. The answer is something much deeper. You don't abandon the 1990s. You have to weaponize them. If staying in the past is a psychological prison and the present reality is too exhausting to bear, what is the way out? How do you cure a trauma response that feels this incredibly good? The answer is not to burn your childhood memories. You don't have to throw away your old CDs, and you don't have to forcefully deprive yourself of comfort. The answer is to stop using the 1990s as a hiding place and start extracting the actual medicine hidden inside of it. You see, you don't actually need a vintage game console or a 1999 sitcom to heal your brain. What your nervous system is desperately craving from the 1990s is not the aesthetic. It is the cognitive boundary. Think about the architecture of the analog world. In the 90s, things ended. A television show aired at 8 p.m. and at 8:30 p.m. it was over. You had to wait a whole week for the next one. A cassette tape finished playing and the room went quiet. When you left work or school, you went home and you were completely, blessedly unreachable. There was a hard, physical border between stimulation and silence. Today, those borders have been entirely eradicated. The internet is an infinite scroll. Work emails follow you into your bed. The algorithmic feed has no bottom, and the world's tragedies are constantly vibrating in your pocket. Your brain is breaking down because it is being forced to run a psychological marathon that has no finish line. To fix this, you have to practice what we can call analog integration. It means taking the architectural boundaries of the 1990s and forcefully installing them into your modern digital life. You have to stop using nostalgia to numb yourself and start using it as a blueprint for your daily routine. You need to give your technology a hard stop. You have to resurrect the concept of being completely unreachable. When you consume media, do not let the algorithm autoplay the next episode to keep you pacified. You choose to hit play, and more importantly, you consciously choose to hit stop. You must slowly reclaim the most terrifying, yet deeply necessary human experience of the modern age, sitting in a quiet room, alone with your own thoughts, and teaching your nervous system that you are actually safe in the present moment. If you grew up in the 90s, you are not a victim of a collapsed reality. You hold a psychological privilege that will never exist again. You are the bridge generation. You are the very last generation in the history of human civilization to know what a quiet, disconnected world actually feels like. You possess the neurological map of both the world before the hyper-connected internet and the world after it. Do not use that map to run backward into a simulated childhood. Use it to navigate forward. Use your memory of the analog world as a standard to demand better boundaries in the digital one. We are all trying to navigate the burnout of this modern era together, and recognizing the trauma is the very first step in taking your mind back. I want you to look closely at your own habits tonight. Head down to the comments and tell me, when was the exact moment you realized your comfort watching was actually a coping mechanism? And more importantly, what is one analog boundary you are going to set this week to protect your peace? If this deep dive helped you understand the unseen neurobiology behind your daily habits, please hit the subscribe button. We are going to continue tearing down the illusions of our modern world and exploring the dark psychology shaping our behavior. Thank you for watching. Now, do yourself a favor. Close this app, embrace the silence, and step back into the real world.